We're on to our last session of the day of Leicester Digital Live. It's a great pleasure that I've managed to persuade Frederik Vallaeys to join us today. I met Fred I think it was about 5 or 6 years ago at HeroConf, and we're a very big fan of the Optymyzr product. So I'm going to shut up and let you get on, and I'll reappear in about 25 minutes. We're running a little bit late, but that's fine. We've got a bit of time at the end, so I'll speak to you soon.
Okay, thanks, Anne. Yeah, and I remember meeting Anne. She was actually a speaker at HeroConf, and we were doing a session on shopping ads. And Anne was going through this amazing strategy that they have, and I was like, oh my God, like if she does that, like that takes so much time. So I asked her about what tools existed that let her business to take that strategy. And she was like, well, there's no tools, there's no automation. And I was like, oh my God, there's no automation? Like, let me go and build it. So that was one of the things we did for Optymyzr, and that's the shopping campaign builder. So Anne's always been a great influence, and thank you for inviting me to the conference and of course putting on this conference. So it is early in California. I've got my coffee here. Hopefully I'm caffeinated enough to keep everyone entertained as you wait for your probably afternoon drink. But I wanted to shift topics here, right? And Yona was talking about basically a house that's on fire in SEO, and maybe having to shift your business to spending more money on PPC to make up for the traffic you're losing in organic. But PPC and paid is shifting dramatically as well, and that's what I wanted to talk about. So I think we all are at the point where we need to make a huge mind shift if we want to continue managing paid search effectively. And it's really the story of how to take back control in a world where PPC is just simply becoming more and more automated every day. And so I'm Fred Vallaeys. I used to be at Google back in 2002. I joined them because I speak Dutch. I was born in Belgium, and they needed someone to translate Google AdWords into Dutch. Not very many of us in the Bay Area who speak Dutch. They found me, so I was lucky enough to join Google, get to work on AdWords for about 10 years, and then I left, and I started a company called Optymyzr, which is a PPC management suite. A lot of the content we're going to talk about today, you can also read more about in my book, Digital Marketing in an AI World. And so thank you, everyone, for joining me today and listening to me. But I wanted to start really with 3 things that worry me in PPC, and really to set the stage about where we are in PPC today. So probably we can all agree, if we do PPC, that the ad platforms are doing a lot of automation, and it seems to continue all the time. I don't think it's a question of, if more stuff will be automated. It's more a question of when will the thing that we are currently doing manually and that we're getting paid to do as paid search managers, when will that thing become automated as well by Google? By the way, that's a huge thing in our business. So we have software to make PPC management easier. I know very well that if I build something that works well, I've got 1 or 2 years until Google catches up and does it too. It's the same in your jobs, right? You know that Google is chasing after you, because if what you're doing, if you invent a new technique, a new strategy, and it works well, they want everyone to use it, because that's going to make everyone more successful. So, and ultimately, I mean, that comes down to the fact that Google Ads is not easy. It's gotten really complicated. And so this illustration from the Shopify blog illustrates that when it comes to bid management nowadays, bid management, Google considers 70 million signals in a matter of milliseconds. There's just no way a human could do that. And the reason they can look at 70 million signals is because even if we were manually setting bids, we could do geographic bid adjustments, time of day bid adjustments, audience bid adjustments, demographic bid adjustments. And if you take all of these individual components and you start multiplying them by each other, well, you can see how you very quickly get to millions and millions of factors that you could use to make a decision in real time at the time that the search is happening to figure out, is that user likely to convert or not? What's the probability of that conversion? That, by the way, is the role of machine learning. Machine learning figures out the probabilities of something happening. In this case, the conversion happening. Right, and so it's really difficult for humans to keep up with that. So that's one reason we're going to continue to see this automation. But then the other side of that coin is that most PPC managers actually seem to like automation. So here we did a study within Optymyzr's data set, and we looked at just a subset of 5,600 accounts, and we saw that 75% of advertisers had tried RSAs. RSAs are responsive search ads. So these are the ads where you provide the components, and then Google on the fly will combine them together into the ad that makes the most sense for whoever that user is that just did the search. Well, so a lot of people try them, 3/4. But then what happens when someone tries it? This is kind of an automation, right? So this is going to tell us the story if advertisers like these automations. And it turns out that 99% of advertisers that we see who try RSAs keep RSAs. So that tells the story that it must be working, right? Either the advertiser is lazy and forgets to turn it off, or they keep it on because it is providing value. It is providing a time savings, right? So another good reason why it's very likely Google is going to continue to automate stuff. And then the second truth that we face is data keeps being taken away. This is the frustration that we all have with Google, right? So just a couple of months ago, they decided to reduce the number of search terms that we could see in the search terms reports. Now, these are the reports that for over a decade, we've all been looking at to make decisions about what negative keywords to add, to keep Google in check, to make sure they're showing our ads for the things that are relevant to our business. While overnight, as you can see in this chart, when they launched this in September, one account here you could see went from 4% of search terms not being visible to 37% of search terms not being visible. And you can see this across accounts, right? It usually was about 3, 4, 5% of your search terms that you couldn't identify. Now it's anywhere from 20 to 40%. And you can see Will Reynolds from Sear also saying that, there's a huge drop in visibility. And so, and by the way, the script to pull this data for yourself is at the bottom there. I promised I would share a number of scripts. I've got all the URLs on the final slide as well, so stick around for that. But there's a script here where you can measure the impact on your own account very, very easily. So data gets taken away. Okay, now the reason that the data being taken away is kind of a bad thing is that human intuition, as we probably all agree, still adds a lot of value in PPC. And so here's an example from Google. So Google says that arranging flowers is a close variant of flower arrangement. And close variant means that even if you have an exact match keyword like flower arrangement, they can show your ad for something that they think has the same meaning. And they think these two words have the same meaning. Okay, now I kind of agree. They're in the same realm of what people might be thinking about, but I think in the case of flower arrangement, somebody's probably looking to buy a floral arrangement. When it comes to arranging flowers, they're probably more likely to look for a YouTube video that explains how to do it, and they're not going to spend money with your business. So yes, kind of the same thing, but also not really the same thing, especially from a commercial value. And so for me to be paying for clicks for that is really a bad thing because it's probably wasted money. Another example that we've seen, Google thinks logo design and trademarking are basically the same thing. This is problematic if you're using exact match keywords to make sure your ads show in the right situations. And then the final bit here is that advertiser controls are being reduced, right? And just last week, we've all seen that Google is absorbing broad match modified into phrase match. Now, what that means is broad match modified. Those are the keywords that have a plus in front of them. Those will stop to exist later this month and running into June. And phrase match, on the other hand, which meant that the words have to appear in a certain order, well, phrase match is going to start behaving more like broad match modified, where stuff can go in between the words. Now, we thought this was really interesting, but it also speaks to kind of a mistake that advertisers have been making. It turns out that broad match modified was intended to have the plus in front of the words that really matter to the advertiser, so that the advertiser could be selective and say, I have hotels in Miami, just in Miami, nowhere else. The word Miami needs to show up in my ad, not some suburb of Miami. Okay, but advertisers by and large put the plus in front of every single word. And we looked at our data. So we saw in Optymyzr, when we analyzed about 162 million keywords, that 89% of advertisers use some level of broad match modified. But 55%, more than half of all the advertisers, put a plus in front of every single broad match modified word. They didn't even realize probably you could be selective with which words you put it in front of. And now for those 45% of advertisers who do seem to be selective, I think it's actually mostly mistakes they're making where they forget to put the plus in front of something, because out of the 162 millions we analyzed and those that were broad match modified, full 95% had a plus in front of every single word, right? So the good news is, if you're concerned with this change, that if you had a plus in front of every single keyword, your broad match modified was called full BMM. that full BMM is going to act very similarly to a phrase match. So you're not going to see a huge shift in traffic. Now, if you do want to analyze the impact for your account, there's a little script. You can grab the link there at the bottom, and it's going to do an analysis, tell you how many duplicate keywords you're going to end up with, what your bid management style is, and if that's reflective of what it should be. And it's also going to tell you how many full and partial BMMs you have. Right, but this is another example of Google just kind of pulling the rug out from under us and taking away some of the controls that we're used to having had. Now, where does that leave us? Well, we have more automation, less data, and fewer controls. And we're supposed to celebrate. It's advertising that works for everyone, right? Let's all be happy about this. And they're like, seriously, Fred? You're happy about this? Well, no, I'm not exactly happy about this, but I'm not making this up. Google actually goes on stage these days when in-person conferences are allowed. Very recently, at the last one they did, they basically said, listen, all this automation, all this smart capability, smart campaigns, smart bidding, smart this, smart that, it's because it needs to be advertising that works for everyone. And so clearly, the mission that Google is on is to make advertising highly democratic, so that anyone, even if you're not an advanced PPC expert, you can get decent results out of Google Ads. And that makes sense for them from a business perspective. But if you're like one of us watching the session, you're probably more on the expert side, and you're probably not so excited by these things. Okay? But luckily, there's a mind shift that we can make. We can actually still win at PPC by shifting how we think about it. We're not competing against the machines. We can be better together with the machines. Right. And this is mostly in the book, but there are really 3 roles that you got to think about yourself playing as automation takes more and more hold in how PPC is being done. And I'll explain each of the roles that are seen here in just a minute. But first of all, there's the role of the PPC doctor, right? There's the PPC doctor, first of all, because doctors are supposed to have good bedside manner. They're supposed to be able to go to the patient and explain to them what's happening and make them feel good about themselves, or as good as they can possibly be made to feel. If you work for an agency, then you probably understand that role very well, right? Sometimes the account just not performing, something happened. You got to go to the patient and communicate that to them. Right? That's a big part of your role. Also, a big part of your role is helping the patient, your client, understand what it is they can do next, what kind of medicine is out there, what kind of PPC solutions might exist to solve the problem that they have. Now, as a doctor, you also kind of have to understand the interactions of different medicines. And that's the example on this slide here. So someone might say, well, listen, we should just turn on smart bidding. We've heard great things about it. It seems to work well for most advertisers. Well, if you turn on smart bidding, but you're on last click attribution, you're actually probably going to break your campaigns, because that's a horrible interaction. And why is that a horrible interaction? Well, it's basically because the machine is not smart. The machine just looks at the numbers. The humans are smart. We have intuition. So imagine a funnel, right? Somebody does generic searches at the top, more specific searches towards the bottom. If you use last click attribution, the only thing the machine sees as being successful and contributing to your business, to your conversions, are those really specific searches at the bottom of the funnel. So it starts to ignore everything that's at the top of the funnel because it's bidding less for those. And that's going to break your campaign. And so here's a very concrete example. Say that you sell sneakers, right? Well, if you look at your conversion data, you're probably going to find that most of your conversions, most of your sales happen when somebody has looked for a specific size, a specific sneaker model, a specific color. Not so much when they're just generally looking for sneakers. They haven't even decided about which brand they want at that point, right? Now, the machine would see that. It would see, okay, there's no conversions for the keyword sneakers. So it bids down for that. And eventually you drop off the page. And guess what? Your competitors step in. They take away all that traffic. That's the problem with last click attribution. You're going to kill your funnel. So you have to switch to a new attribution model. But that's just one of the many things the doctor does. The doctor has to understand how things work together. What are the solutions you can put in place to help your client? Now, here's another one. I don't know if people have seen this little table here, but basically, if you say, well, you got to change your bid management style. Well, did you know there's like 11 types of bid management within Google alone? And that's not even considering third-party tools. And then a lot of people also don't realize this because Google lets you set bid adjustments even though you're doing automated bidding of some sort. Well, a lot of these things are not compatible. Interestingly, device bid adjustments do work together with target CPA, but not with target ROAS. Okay, so here's a table that gives you the overview of this, but basically the doctor can help you figure out what's what. Now, as the PPC pilot, that's the next role. By the way, did you know the average pilot flies a plane about 11 minutes, actually controls the plane. The rest of the time, the plane's flying itself. So why do we have so many pilots in planes? Well, first of all, because it makes the consumer, the flyer, feel better. But the pilot is also there to deal with the unexpected. Is the right data coming into the system, which helps the machine, the airplane, make the right decision? And if the wrong data is coming in, if a sensor is broken, how do we fix it? Or do we manually take over control of that plane? That's a very similar role that happens to PPC experts. Once you're on automation, you have to monitor that it's looking at the right things and that no unexpected side effects are happening. And we have a great case study, by the way, that we put together with Annika. And it was about exactly this. It was a switch to smart bidding. And all of a sudden, campaigns that were not on smart bidding started to behave very differently, unexpectedly. And what was happening was competitors noticed that some campaigns were changing bid management because Google was doing the automated bidding. And so those competitors, they weren't selective. They just changed bids across the board for everything. And so now the campaigns that weren't being automatically managed by Google also started to see side effects. Right? It's the second order, this third order effect that you sometimes don't expect that you have to look out for. And that's the role of the PPC pilot. And so here's a specific example in this slide, but experiments. Experiments are a fantastic way to test out new things and make sure they actually work. Well, if you're going to do experiments in Google, you have to literally look at 50, 100 pages to know what's happening with these experiments across your MCC account. Here's a script that I've put together that puts every experiment across your MCC dashboard onto a single Google spreadsheet. So you have one place to look at. And that's kind of akin to, think if the pilot had to run to the back of the plane to check if the rudders or whatever they call them, the ailerons, were working correctly. And then he had to run to the cockpit to make sure that he was headed in the right direction. That makes no sense, but that's kind of how Google works a lot of times. Here, it's about giving you a better dashboard, right? So this is going to make you a better PPC manager. And then probably one of the most important roles that we can play is that of the PPC teacher. Remember, a lot of this automation is based on machine learning. It says it right there in the name. It's machine learning. Someone needs to teach the machine what to learn. And that's our human role, right? And so what I thought was interesting is that at Google, one of the 10 core principles of innovation when I was there, and I talked about this a lot, but it was to share all information with everyone in the company. And the idea was very simple. It's if you share all the information with your colleagues who presumably you've hired because you think they are smart, and you tell them what problem you're trying to fix, and they have the same data as you, well, then they probably will make good decisions to fix that problem, right? It's the same with the machines. Think of machine learning as the new colleague you just hired, but if you give it incomplete information, it's not going to be able to do what you want it to do. It's going to go in the wrong direction. And it's not the fault of the machine. It's the fault of you not having set goals and targets correctly, right? So that becomes your role. And this is the big shift. So think about how you manage AdWords or Google Ads today. Think of this big bubble, this big circle that you're in, right? You're managing keywords, bids, ad text, bid adjustments, all these things, extensions. But really, what is the purpose of doing all of this? Well, it's because you want leads, sales, and signups to come out of that. But really think about that a little bit more like, I'm with Optymyzr. Like, do I really want someone to sign up for a 2-week free trial? I mean, yeah, I think that's cool when they do, but what I really want, I'm going to do a little Spice Girls bit here in a minute, but what I really want is to get people to pay for the software to become subscribers, right? And if you're not communicating that back into the system, it's going to break. So let's shift this. Let's think about, as PPC managers, our job is becoming less and less to manage inside the bubble of AdWords, but at the periphery of AdWords, what goes into it? How do we help that machine to be smarter, right? So what is the true value we seek, and put that back into the system? And so Google even says this too, but basically, as all of these things become more and more automated, the winners are going to be the ones who do the best job at setting the KPIs and communicating the goals to the algorithms. Now, I just told you you can't do bid adjustments if you're on smart bidding. Well, actually, let me take this back. Here's a little trick and a little workaround that I don't think a lot of people know about, but you can actually set bid adjustments with smart bids. So say that you get sales in different countries. We'll use the geo example here, right? You get sales in different countries. Now say that you get two sales that are exactly the same value on the same date. One happens in London, the other happens in Brussels. You kind of prefer the sales that come from London because you know you have more stores in London. You think in the back of your mind, I'm probably going to have higher lifetime value. Those tend to be better customers, right? I wish I could have a bid adjustment for London. Well, what you do is, even though the amount of the sale was the exact same between the two countries, you go back to Google and you do a conversion value update. So after the fact, you say, oh, if the conversion had the geolocation of London, boost up the value by 20%. So over time, what you're doing is you're assigning more value to the thing that you like. And now Google's machine learning is going to go find you more of the clicks of the customers that meet those criteria. So effectively here, I'm able to do geo bid adjustments. And I can do this really for any factor that I care about. But again, my optimization is not inside of AdWords. It's not setting the actual bid adjustment. It's me mucking around with my conversion values to influence the machine learning system to do what I want it to do. And so really one way to think about this is you probably don't want to try to set geo bid adjustments based on expected differences in conversion rate. Because you know what? Google's got that. Google can see conversion rates. But what Google often can't see is the thing that's in the back of your head. The thing that says, like, why is it to my business that I care more about someone from this place versus that place? Like, if I'm selling camping gear and I sell it to people in California and people in New York, well, California has a better climate. People tend to go camping more of the year. So they use the equipment more, so they come back to buy more stuff more frequently, right? I sell the exact same tent to both of them, but I have some lifetime value, and I may not have even calculated lifetime value. I may not even really understand the exact numbers for my business, but I know there's something about it, and I can use that to feed back into the Google system to make it work better, right? With all of this, I think one thing that helps us unlevel the playing field is to think about the concept of automation layering. Everything we've talked about here today, like whether you're the PPC pilot or the PPC teacher, I've seen people take up more time to help the machines than they were spending before managing the whole campaign themselves. And so you really have to think, how do I take the things that I've been doing and how do I build my own automations? How do I build my own tool set around that? So is it an AdWords script? Is it me hiring an API developer? Is it me learning how to write a script myself using some basic JavaScript? Or do I take some of the scripts that I'm giving you here today as a foundation, but at least get you on the path to automating? Now, the whole point about automation layering at some level is because I've said that humans plus machines are better than machines alone, right? That's something that most people would probably agree on. Now, I was thinking about that and I was like, well, is it the human in that equation that is the absolute necessity to make the machine better? Or is it actually the fact that Google does things that we don't fully trust or we don't fully understand? And so there's this opaque black box that we cannot look into because it's painted black. Google does things within it that we don't understand. That's scary. Sometimes it doesn't do what we expected it to do. Now, me as a human, I could look at the output and I could make decisions about how to steer the automations. But I can also tell my own program, my own automation, what to look out for. Is my CPA going off the scales, even though it's supposed to be automated? Are my bids going out of whack, right? If that's happening, either send me an email or make some automated adjustments. I don't have to be doing this manually. I can set a script to do this, and that's the concept of automation layering. And then in a couple of minutes, I want to leave you with a couple more scripts and some cool ways that I think you can actually take on the role of the PPC pilot. But now it's no longer the commercial pilot. The commercial pilot wants to get the whole plane safely from point A to point B. There's also the fighter pilot. He wants to shoot the other plane down. He wants to get the competitive edge. And many of you in PPC probably want that competitive edge at some level, right? So here's a script that I built at the beginning of the pandemic. So Google has this anomaly detection script, and it basically looks for day of week patterns that are unusual. So basically says, like, listen, right now it's a Tuesday, it's around 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. How many clicks, how many conversions do we typically expect to have accrued on a typical Tuesday by this time of the day, looking back at, like, say, 8 weeks of history? I thought that was cool, but then all of a sudden the pandemic hits, And it's no longer about an anomaly on a day-to-day basis, but it's like literally geographic anomalies, right? Oh, in the UK, everybody's under a stay-at-home order. I'm assuming, because God, things change all the time, right? This is the problem. I don't know what's happening outside my own city. But here, as of a couple of weeks ago, I can leave my house again, right? So that impacts probably what people search for, how they behave. And so this script will look at anomalies on a geographic level, and it'll say, what is a typical behavior for the city of London, for the city of Leicester, over the course of a number of weeks? And does today look like it was behaving differently? Okay, send an email to Fred, so now Fred can go and look up in the Oxford database if something has changed around pandemic restrictions. Did the stores get to reopen? Do people get to travel again, right? Has that impacted what's happening? This is a great way for me to know, down to the city level, what is changing. Now, the unleveling tactic number 2 is, even if you're going to switch onto some sort of an automation from Google, it's often not like one campaign. You probably want to have multiple campaigns, and whether this is smart shopping or you're just doing regular keyword-based campaigns with TROAS targets or TCPA targets, you probably want to split stuff out a bit. You probably want to have different targets. And that makes sense because your products that you sell probably have different margins. If you're a service business, you probably know that different services have different values, right? If you're a plumber and you get to plumb a whole house for new construction, that's probably worth more to you than unclogging somebody's toilet. So you want to have these different campaigns so you can have different targets for that. Now, that's kind of akin to sorting your laundry in a way, right? So you got this great automation. It's this great invention. I'm sure you've heard about it. It's called the washing machine. Okay, it makes your clothes clean. Well, when that was introduced, people probably put all their colored stuff and their white clothes, they put it all together, and then it came out and they were like, oh my God, why is my t-shirt pink? It used to be white before. And that's kind of the same thing in PPC. I mean, like, you got this great washing machine that does all your bidding for you, but you still want to sort your loads. You want to put like things together so that the machine can do a better job with it. It's not that dissimilar. And I hope you like that analogy of the washing machine. But basically, the idea here is all this sorting process that has to happen. You don't have to do that manually. You can write a script for it, or you can use tools like Optymyzr that will help you do it and keep things in the right place. Now, the other one here that I'll show you a script for on the next slide is this whole notion of close variants. And I wish this slide would build, so I don't know if you probably can't see my mouse cursor, so follow me on the slide a little bit, right? But the notion of close variants is that in the middle of the circle, you have the exact match keyword, which was specifically defined. Now, Google, with close variants, starts to go a little bit broader from that, and things become less and less relevant. The problem is Google gets to set the threshold for at what level they think something is closely related enough that it should be eligible to match. They make that decision. You may not like that decision. You may want to be a little bit tighter about how big that circle gets. Keep it back within the green. So we have a nice little script here that you can install in your account, and it'll basically show you a list of what was the exact match keyword and what was the close variant that Google thought was related to that. And now you can see, now you can make decisions. Now you can put in negative keywords if you don't like this. And by the way, for any Optymyzr users on the call, we just put in a new factor in the rule engine that even calculates the difference. So now you can literally say, if something is more than like 5 characters different, automatically make it a negative for my exact match, right? So it's these types of automation layers that give you back a tremendous amount of control. So ultimately, I think the mind shift that we really have to make is think about, stop managing Google inside of the bubble of Google, but think about how you can manage at the edges of the Google ad system, right? So a lot of these controls that we love pulling, these things that we love doing, it's because we had to in 2001. It's because there was no other way. The campaign would completely fail if we didn't specify each keyword, each ad text, each bid. The machine can do a really good job at that, but the machine needs to be optimized. It needs to know what matters to you, what values you have, right? So imagine the machine being your smartest PPC manager. You just need to optimize what goals you give it. And I think that's a fundamental shift. And I think that's a big shift, but I think that's one that we have to make if we wish to be successful over the next decade in PPC. So with that, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. I hope you have glasses of wine and beer following next, even if virtually at a conference. Here's a list of all the scripts I shared. And Anne, thank you very much for having me on today.
Thank you very much, Fred. That was really interesting. I love hearing you talk. I think it's really interesting. When I first started using Facebook's ad manager, it was completely alien to me, the fact that you couldn't control anything. And I guess that's been quite a lesson, because you have to let everything learn in Facebook. And I guess it's making us a little bit less suspicious about some of the automation in Google. But I mean, a good when we were doing that case study with your tool, we were using ROAS bidding, and your tool allowed us to put some limits which Google's didn't. So this is why we continue to use Optymyzr, because it just gives us a lot more control, and we can do a lot more interesting things. The scripts are brilliant. So you've got a lot of fans at Annika. So thank you very much for talking for us today. Well, I think that's it. Thanks, Fred, for closing the day.